I think that's the tricky part with CrossFit, obviously, is like all the variance that's happening. Where with running, it's like, if you're doing, whether it's a half marathon, any longer distance, what your energy system is. So now it's like, all right, how do we optimize that? Well, we're going to try to push that lactate threshold higher. How do you do that? Okay, now what other qualities do we need to kind of continue pushing that envelope and making sure that you're more aerobically fit? What are the qualities for that? Start talking about like mitochondrial density and size and efficiency and lactate clearance. And that's where all that stuff comes in. And the variables are so much more easy to manipulate and control versus CrossFit, where it's like very difficult.
The Fitness Movement is brought to you by Zor Fitness. We offer coaching and individualized program design, as well as educational content for coaches and athletes. It's all one place, zorfitness.com.
Well, I had an idea today, and we're going to run it by day. We'll see where this goes. We're very unscripted today, which is actually pretty normal for us at this point.
Yeah, normal.
Yeah, there's one time where Chris and I were talking. It was completely unscripted, and he had somebody reach out to him that was like super impressed at like how thought out we were and like what we were saying. I was like, I'm glad it's coming across that way, because it was very impromptu.
I was just listening to a podcast about it. Like one of the guys was saying like he has this like approach when he makes posts that are like super well thought out. Like he does all the research, does all the cool designs, and the post gets a few likes, and people are like, oh, this is cool. And then he'll post some dumb shit, and then it's just like, that's the one, and he's just like, I'm just gonna post this, and that's the one that goes viral.
That's how I feel about video half the time when I post stuff. I'm like, it could take me literally like 90 minutes to edit this like 30-second teaser, and it'll get like, if just like depending when you post it, or like for whatever reason, it'll get like 20 likes. And I'm like, why did I take the time to do that? And then I'll post like a photo that I just like snapped when I walked out in the gym, and it'll get like 90. And I'm like, okay, what am I doing here?
Yeah.
Life of social media.
Yeah.
Don't understand the algorithm. But yeah, today basically I wanted to pick your brain, frankly. Since you have a lot more breadth of experience in this domain than me. But like one of the things that I've been thinking about, and it's just like really just been hyped up lately, is like all the Zone 2 stuff. And we don't have to specifically talk about Zone 2, but I think a lot of it will go that direction. And I want to talk about it. So it's sort of like, what is the role, and like, what is maybe the role? I mean, I think most people understand that, but it's like, how much is appropriate for someone who's a competitive CrossFitter relative to other domains? So like, you don't write the conditioning or like the sport work for your triathletes, but you at least see a lot of what goes on behind the scenes in the program as you're writing the strength components of their stuff. So you have a very good understanding of it. And then you yourself are going through pretty extensive endurance training at this point, prepping for like longer road races and things. So it's like, you also see it for yourself. So I guess let's start with your own training, and then we'll kind of take it to the two different ends of the spectrum, which is like even people who do this professionally, like triathletes, and then also like the CrossFitters on the other side of it. So what kind of like, take us through like a week, like how much do you keep track of like where you're at for different zones? Is it more based on like, I'm trying to get certain mileage in and varying like my paces relative to race times? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think zones is kind of tricky, just because it's, when you're running, your heart rate zone is going to be a lot higher than what it would be when you're doing other aerobic work like cycling or, incline walking, Stairmaster on the air bike, rowing. You can maintain
showing your background here.
Stairmaster. Stairmaster, you know where that's coming from. Speaking of, the other day I woke up, it was like Monday morning, and I was like, I'm just going to go to Anytime Fitness, which is one of the commercial gyms around here, and I'm just going to hop on the Stairmaster. And that was
like your urge in the morning? Not like,
yeah, I woke up and I was like, the Stairmaster.
I could crush a Monster and some Stairmaster right now.
Yeah. cracked open that energy drink so quick. But yeah, so running for those who are not, elite runners is hard to maintain certain zones. So
yes,
I try to stay away
Great
from
example.
that
I mean, I feel like
runners.
most people who are not elite athletes who do track their zones are very aware of this, especially when running, where it's like a lot of people, they literally can't run in zone 2. Like if you want me to at least jog, it's got to be at least zone 3, coach, because I can't do zone 2. That happens
For sure.
Quite a few athletes in that boat who are actually pretty decent CrossFitters, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So they have the fitness, right? And I see it across the board, even with people who are great runners. Even for them, like they usually push their zones up a little higher, the heart rate zone. So if it's something zone 2, it's actually like zone 3, but they just call it zone 2. And
like as high as they can in zone 2 without it going over. Yeah.
So they add like an extra 10 to 20 beats per minute to their zone 2, and that's what they consider zone 2. So most of the times I'm not considering zones for running, but instead I'm looking at like RPE, how hard is it, and also, more subjective feedback or pace. Because I like most people who have been running for a little bit, even if they're not great runners, just recreational runners like myself, you'll be familiar with what paces are easy, right? So it's like, hey, go on a 30-minute run at conversational pace, which is considered like, that's in quotations like zone 2. It's like conversational paces should be pretty easy stroll. Like you're going at, let's say, your 5K race pace plus 2 minutes per mile pace. So
let me think about that real quick. 5K, so that's probably like just over 6 minutes for me, so a little over 8 minutes. Yeah, that's probably even pushing zone 3 for me.
Yeah, exactly. But it's probably a lot easier, right? So you're able to maintain that.
It would feel conversational still.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if heart rate is approaching zone 3. Yeah. So maybe plus 2 to 3 minutes over 5K time trial, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's how I would I try to communicate that for if someone's they have a good understanding of what their paces are. Usually 2 to 3 minutes above that. So when I'm doing my own program, I keep that in mind. I'm not I keep track of my heart rate. I look at it, but I'm not holding true to that. Although it does give me indication, right? Like, oh, hey, this run that's supposed to feel conversational and easy felt pretty hard, and my heart rate's also reflecting that because I'm at 180. That's usually I'm running at like a 150 at this pace. So that gives you just like another indicator if you're fatigued or whatever. But most of my runs are like that. So I would say in a week I'm running 4 to 5 times a week, and then doing 1 to 2 cross training sessions, which that's where the Stairmaster comes in, and some indoor cycling. So and those are like my true easy work, and those are like true zone 2s because I can maintain zone 2s on those. But on the running side, I have 1 to 2 sessions of threshold runs, where a little bit faster pace, threshold or tempo intervals, and then the rest of them is pretty much steady state, conversational, easy-ish run, just building that aerobic base.
Yeah, and I feel like that might be one of the things that could be different depending on what you're preparing for. If you're preparing for a marathon, you're just going to have to spend so much volume accumulation time that you're not going to do very much tempo or threshold type stuff. Where it's just you just need to be pounding the pavement and collecting your miles sort of thing. Especially if someone hasn't really approached that kind of mileage before. If you're going back there after you've done it already, it's a little bit different. But yeah, I think for a lot of people that if they just haven't been there, it's you're gonna have to spend the majority of your time just doing very easy volume accumulation, which maybe don't even care what the zone is, and you just gotta collect your miles. And it's it's more about the feel, like you were saying, or even paces relative to something like marathon.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of resources out there use the whole 80-20 rule, which can be useful, but I think it's very vague. I think if you're running a lot and you're accumulating a lot of volume, the 80-20 rule is probably pretty accurate. But
Yeah.
if you're a newer runner and you don't have as much volume, that's going to be a little bit different because you just need to run. And sometimes having an easy run isn't not doable, but like it's
they
not
almost
as
can't run easy when you're starting out.
Exactly.
It might be like 80% walking, 20% running versus like easy running. There's like no such thing as easy running. Yeah, it's kind of like there's no such thing as easy
runs.
CrossFit almost. Like you can practice movements, you could do EMOMs where it's like only certain, like, you're only doing a certain number of reps or a certain amount of time on top of the minute or whatever. But it's like, if you're actually doing CrossFit, it's really hard to make that up below like, it's hard to make that just like comfortable. Like for most people, you're like, if you're doing burpees and snatches, even if it's anywhere close to mimicking what you're actually doing in the sport, you're going to be working hard. So then you have to get more creative in how you slice and dice it. So I think for something like CrossFit, like 80-20, it's like, I think about more like, okay, we have to be able to get some easy work in here, otherwise you're going to explode. But it's like, you're not focused on like a ratio necessarily. Or maybe it's like high and low sessions or some other way to do it, but it's not like I'm thinking about like volume as like, okay, this 80% of this should be easy. It's like, nah, like you're in an intensive sport, like a lot of it's going to be intense. And I'd be curious, like something like track cycling, how they would do it, because that's obviously like a super intense sport, but it's cyclical based. Or even like, something like sprint swimming, it would be probably a similar boat where it's like, they're not doing like a lot of like steady state stuff because that's not what they're asked to do in their sport. They're asked to be like explosive and fast. So it's like, sport demands just change. I mean, in a sport like CrossFit is so varied, but at the same time, like a lot of the stuff is like in the middle, so to speak, where it's lactic and it's maybe in that 8 to 12 minute time domain for a lot of stuff. So it is going to be a challenge to just make that where it's sustainable, because it's when you're doing it in sport context, it's not.
Yeah, and I think that's the tricky part with CrossFit, obviously, is like all the variance that's happening. So it's like, what energy system should you really focus on? And you mentioned like the lactic there, and it's like it could there's so much variance there. There's so much, where with running, it's like, if you're doing, whether it's a half marathon, any longer distance, what your energy system is. So now it's like, all right, how do we optimize that? Well, we're going to try to push that lactate threshold higher. How do you do that? Okay, now what other qualities do we need to kind of continue pushing that envelope and making sure that you're more aerobically fit? What are the qualities for that? You start talking about like mitochondrial density and size and efficiency and lactate clearance, and that's where all that stuff comes in. And the variables are so much more easy to manipulate and control versus CrossFit, where it's like very difficult.
Yeah, the most contrast example would be like, okay, you're preparing for a marathon in October. It's like, this is very specific. You know exactly what you need to be doing. It's one thing. It's running, and you know exactly how long it is, and you know exactly when the date is. You know the course. There's like everything about it is known except maybe like the weather, right? Or like some very like odd factors outside of that. But it's like with CrossFit especially, but even like something like triathlon. Okay, now you have 3 disciplines, right? And you might race in a couple different distances. It's like, or things along those lines. So it starts to vary a little bit, where you at least have some different movements that you have to account for and like have to manage volume between the 3. But again, something like CrossFit, it is so varied. It's like, okay, say I don't know this, but say I'm competing in Crash Crucible in October. It's like, okay, I probably know there's like 6 or 7 scored events, and I could probably guess like some of the movements. Like there'll probably be running, there'll probably be some other ergs in there. There's gonna be some weightlifting, like. But outside of that, it's like, man, I don't know exactly. Like, there's so many unknowns. So, the other thing that you mentioned that I feel like it depends, is that it really depends on the type of like ability level of the CrossFit athlete that we're talking about. Because there's people who are like pretty rudimentary in some of like their skill development things where it just doesn't like adding in zone 2 would be like the worst thing you could do for them. Because it's like you're just wasting their time when they should just be getting better at their sport. It's like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Anyway, it's like they just need to be getting better at the thing. And if they spend all this time doing this low-level conditioning, not that it's unuseful, but it's not going to translate to their sport context anyway because their proficiency is so low that it just doesn't even matter. Probably the best example would be like throw somebody in a pool who like doesn't know how to swim properly and they have their head up the whole time and they're like not, they're not even having their head in the water to breathe. And it's like, okay, we're going to do 100 repeats on this clock and do this. It's like, bro, they just need to get better at swimming with like somebody who knows how to teach them. So yeah. I think for some of the higher level athletes, which that's where you can start to pull in a little bit more of like the minutia of, things like zone training, and much more things can be heart rate based, and you're getting a little bit more into the nitty gritty because it's like they are starting to search for the margins a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I was trying to think of an analogy as well as you were coming up with your analogy. And it's like teaching someone Olympic lifting who has never lifted in general before, done any strength training.
It's like giving the percentage work when it's like their first week lifting. It's like,
yeah,
they're going to lift 20 pounds more. Just like have them lift. like they don't need to be doing this linear progression or whatever. It's like, just let them lift.
Exactly. So I think that's a really good example. Like if you're a CrossFit athlete, like zone 2 work or conversational pace work, more aerobic work will be useful later down the road when you have that level of fitness already. And like now you're trying to push that, as I mentioned, like that threshold and those limits a little bit more. But initially, like you're working on all these skills, I think just doing CrossFit in general is going to move the needle in the direction that you need it to in terms of fitness and your aerobic capacity. And so just doing CrossFit, and then eventually you're going to hit a point where it's like, okay, now let's introduce these, because you're doing so much volume and you're like, you have that high intensity work so often, and it's so structured throughout the week and with your plan. Now let's put in that, like, we still need to get more volume in and work in, but we can't continue giving you that high threshold stuff. So let's put in this easy aerobic stuff that can kind of complement what you're already doing, but also accumulate that volume so that you can keep pushing.
Yeah. And I think as I'm thinking about like the type of people who I write it for more, it's one of the another thing is like how many sessions they have, which is like so obvious, like when you think about it. It's like, well, duh, if you're just not training that much, you don't get to add this in. It's like the important stuff goes in first. So it's like if you only have 6 sessions to train in a week of 90 minutes each, like maybe you get like 10 minutes of like a zone 2 pace at the end, but it's like, I don't even care if you use heart rate at that point. It's just going to be like a cool down bike. It's like, okay, once you've gotten to a certain threshold in some of these things where it's like, okay, if you now have like 6 or 7 sessions by the time Wednesday night's over, like you're not even halfway through your week. It's like, okay, something here has to give in terms of intensity because you can't push 6 or 7 sessions in like 72 hours that high, or something bad is going to happen. So it's like, when you're dealing with that problem, that's when you start to be like, okay, we can't just, I mean, you could, but you shouldn't, especially not year round, just continue to like hammer intensity for all of those. So it's like, how can we intelligently build some of this like lower level work in that's going to be supportive to your sport work, and then also like good from like a joint perspective, from like a nervous system perspective, because you're just getting more oxygenation to the system as well. So those are maybe some of the things I start to think about for CrossFit athletes when I start to decide when I should like add in more zone 2 work.
Yeah. And I'm sure I think you do this as well, where if you're working with like a CrossFit athlete and you're trying to get in zone 2 work, I don't keep it exclusively like, oh, just go 30 minutes on the rower or running or whatever, like I'll put in some odd object stuff in there, kind of make it a little bit of CrossFit-y with like rounds and intervals, but like keep it at an easy pace or an easy RPE or effort level, so that, you know, you're still hitting that quality, but the quality is a little bit more specific to CrossFit and the movements.
Yeah, normally if it's like, 30 minutes zone 2, it's like maybe that's if someone's doing like at least 3 a.m. sessions and they have to be like short and sweet, maybe like one of those becomes like a 30-minute zone 2 bike or something.
Yeah.
And like the other one might be intervals and the other one might be mixed or whatever. And then it's like active recovery days are a great time for as someone who needs that kind of supportive work, and they're not going to be in a really trash place where like zone 2 is even more than they should be doing on recovery day. Then it's like that's a good place to add it in. Sometimes I'll like do like bookends to a session, so like 10 or 15 minutes on the bike at like a zone 2 pace at the beginning, 15 minutes zone 2 at the end. They just got 30 minutes of zone 2. You add that 3 spots in their week, and it's like, okay, you just accumulated a couple hours of zone 2 work. Or you could even do it where you do it more as like active recovery, which might not even be zone 2, right? Which is, again, we're talking zone 2 a lot, but I don't think it's just like easier cyclical work, let's call it. Where it's like active recovery pace between intervals for especially people who are super powerful, where if you just give them complete rest, they can kind of fake their way through an interval. Whereas like if you put them on active recovery, it becomes more sport specific for them in terms of like the paces they're holding when they actually do their intervals. But then it also is like all the benefits that you would get from something along the lines of like that lower zone work also comes along with it. So it's like, okay, you're doing, 18, 15, 12, GHD, bar facing burpee, dumbbell, hang clean and jerk, 70. You're going to do that 3 times and you rest 5 minutes between on the bike between each one. Something like that, right? Where it's like, if you just have them rest for 5 minutes, they're going to be like completely recharged and like ready to smash the next one. Where it's like something like 5 minutes on the bike, as simple as that will be like enough to keep a little bit of like breathing elevated and a little bit of heart rate up, that it'll be more like 15 to 20 minute AMRAP pace when they actually go through, which is like maybe more sport specific for them.
Yeah. And I like that too, because it kind of correlates with running as well. When you're doing like intervals and you're going at, let's say, 5 minutes at a threshold pace, and then you're going to do 5 minutes at an easy like recovery pace. So then you're kind of teaching your body with that lactate like clearance side of things.
Right,
so,
and especially for people who are super powerful, like that's a necessary thing to like keep in like almost year round for somebody like that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's an easy way to do it. So instead of them just completely resting, like put them on the bike, do something easy, just kind of get keep that going and teach their body with that. And I think that plays like a really good role with that. Like it's very similar to that threshold training. And I think that's something that, especially as you get closer to competition, if you're racing, right, you're going to be doing that. If you're so far out from a race, then most of it's going to be just like volume building and getting all the mileage in. But as you get closer, even like on your second phase or third phase, as you're getting closer to that race, you want to work those type of qualities. And then the same thing with like CrossFit too.
So for the professional triathletes you work with, again, not that you're necessarily writing it, but you see under the hood for a lot of that stuff, are they doing it off of paces a lot of the time? Or is it like, for example, you were saying like, okay, for my training, I'm going off, maybe it's plus or minus off my 5K or off my 10K time, or even like those descriptors where you might say like conversational pace or something. Like how are they doing it for the most part?
It ranges. So like on the bike, they'll have either their wattage of their, maybe like a FTP for when they're biking, or some type of like power metric there's also the heart rate component with it too. So they're all very familiar with using they carry that around, the heart rate straps, chest straps. So they're very familiar with that. So it ranges, and then some of it's pacing. So it is a mixture of all of it.
Yeah.
And for example, like there was one session where we were preparing them for a race in Miami that many of them were going to, and we just had this really long aerobic session on the indoor treadmill in the weight room. So they were just taking up all the treadmills, and that was heart rate based.